Hello everyone, welcome to Vanalog IAS Current Affair Analysis for 13th of March 2021. In this video, we'll be talking about a couple of issues, one with respect to the dependence of foreign capital in the form of FDI and its implications for Indians. And the second article is taken from the historical context of Dandi March and the lessons that Indians could learn from Dandi March. Needed national security shield in FDI. What is the basic premise of this article? So, this article highlights the need for specific regulation to deal with national security threat that is coming out of strategic FDI. Now, when we're talking about foreign direct investment from the Chinese, we are basically worried about the fact that because of the economic might that China brings with its investments, there is a possibility that it will hijack the Indian economic system. Take a look at investments in companies like Paytm, or if you take a look at the most of the unicorn clubs, that is, um, startups with a valuation of more than 1 billion US dollars. Most of these companies have investments from Chinese investors. China being a communist country, the possibility of having democracy there is quite unpredictable. Considering all these facts, there is a possibility that China government might actually take over the private capitalists as well, and therefore, last April, India has subjected all Chinese FDI to government screening and it made it mandatory. What was the purpose? Basically, the purpose was to curb any sort of opportunistic takeovers or distress sale. Pandemic has disturbed the entire ecosystem of our economy, and during this times of lows, there is possibility that MSME companies can undertake distress sale of their companies. If Chinese companies take over these companies, there is a possibility that the entire economy will be in the hands of China if unregulated. Several economies, including US, Australia, Canada, and Germany, also face certain similar concerns because when the entire world was reeling under the pressure of the COVID crisis, it was China which was growing about 4 to 5% after an initial slump. So they blocked specific takeovers using special laws for national security. Screening of FDI took place in this entire scenario. So this entire experience has taught that India definitely needs a law which will address the investments which raised genuine national security concerns, and also it has to differentiate it from those that do not create this national security concerns. So if we have to talk about the regulations at the moment, we only have FEMA. India regulates foreign investments primarily through this FEMA, Foreign Exchange Management Act. Now, in this act, there are two specific objectives facilitating the external trade and payments. The law's second mandate is to maintain forex reserves in the country. So, in tune with these objectives itself, our Reserve Bank of India has acted in consultation with the central government. What does it do? It regulates capital accounts. So, if you take a look at our balance of payments, we have one capital account and the other one is current account. So there are restrictions on how much capital you can bring into the country. Therefore, we can say that there is no full rupee convertibility on the capital side, whereas on the current side there is convertibility. So because of the restrictions imposed on this, we are able to manage our forex reserves. But the biggest shortcoming of FEMA is the fact that it does not actually regulate those elements which are intangible. For example, we are talking about the strategic FDI. according to the present scheme of things, say for example, if RBI allows some X amount of money into the country, beyond this, the investor cannot invest in our country. But what if China creates a army of people who are wealthy enough to invest in our country? Say 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. 10 people come up with X amount in a country, and all of them invest in a single sector. Say, like for example, manufacturing of 5G equipment and telecom. With data as well as internet penetration becoming all the more important for the future of our economy, which is supposed to handle Industrial Revolution 4.0, this significant strategic step will alter the fundamentals of our economy because of the strategic hold that China can have over telecom sector somewhere in the future. So the question arises when we think about FEMA, whether FEMA can actually handle this kind of cases. Not really. So there is a need for addressing this shortcoming and explicitly laying down the legal principles which can impact our economy and diversify the risks. So in this regard, there is a need for coming out with certain research work, and we also have policy papers which are published by various institutes where the threats that emanate out of foreign acquisitions are studied. So one such study has been quoted in this article. Let us get into the details of that. So the study says that there are certain threats. The first one is dependency on foreign supplier. In the times of COVID, we have seen that unprecedented breakage of supply chains and the lockdowns imposed across the world hampered economic activity very badly. So similarly, due to any other reason, the first threat that arises when there is a foreign acquisition is India is dependent on foreign controlled supplier of goods and services. This can hamper economic activity in our country. Say for example, if telecom sector and internet becomes a tool or a commodity that will be at the mercy of a foreign investor, how can we expect strategic autonomy in our economy? So for this threat to be credible, it needs to be further established that the industry in which the acquisition is taking place is not concentrated in the hands of a few. So it is important to diversify the investments in our economy from different sources. The second aspect is technology transfer. So whenever we are talking about the technology transfer aspect, there can be delays in this technology transfer. And also, when we're talking about this tech transfer, we have to understand if the proposed acquisition transferring a technology or an expertise to a foreign control entity will take place. That is, Indian company is giving away this technology to someone else. What is the threat that it can create to India's sovereignty and national security? Therefore, we have to consider this aspect as well, both from the foreign side as well as the domestic side. Now, when we're coming to the third point, we are talking about surveillance, the threat of infiltration. So, this arises if a acquisition allows some sort of infiltration into our economy, whether it is because of human agents or non-human agents. So again, this will sort of create a dependency, and this threat is all the more important to be addressed if we don't want to compromise on our national security at the premise that it will be reducing costs through automation. Say for example, if you automate a lot of public services, and this automation services will create an ecosystem where there is no possibility of human intervention, and suddenly the system gets hacked. What happens? This is what happened when the nuclear power plant at Kundankulam in Tamil Nadu was allegedly hacked, and a cyber attack has brought the operations of the plant to a halt. So we need to increase our cyber security expertise as well. So that is another threat that is emanating out of the FDI. So how do we deal with this? What is the way forward? We need to come up with certain conceptual clarity in the new law. So what this law should actually do is the question that is raised by this article. At this point, this article writer suggests that we take certain inspiration from countries like Australia and Canada. For example, Australia itself created a Acquisitions and Takeovers Act of 1975, and similarly, Canada also came up with a law in 1985 where it empowers a minister to reject certain foreign acquisitions. So, what is the takeaway from this entire discussion? It is the fact that we not only need FDI but also we also should understand the pressure that it might bring along with the capital. So, that is the gist of this article. This second article is taken from the Indian Express and it is titled Significance of Gandhi's Dandi March. The reason why we're talking about this particular historical event is because the government decided to launch what is called as the Azadi Ki Amrit Mahotsav, that is the celebration of 75 years of our independence. So, Dandi March or Salt March, as it is famously called, is basically nothing but a non violent civil disobedience movement in colonial India, which has fundamentally altered the course of our freedom struggle. So, what happened in this? Basically, salt was supposed to be a freely available commodity, and the British has taxed even salt. They have not left out salt as well as a source of revenue. Just to put things into context, in the present day, you attract 0% GST on salt. So, coming back to the topic, what is the lesson that we can learn from this? But before that, we'll understand the course of events that culminated into this Gandhi's Dandi March. In the course of our independence, 1920s was marked by Gandhiji's non-cooperation movement. After coming back from South Africa and studying the conditions locally, in the 1920s, the Congress, headed by Mahatma Gandhi's advice as a mentor, has launched this non cooperation movement by aligning with the Khilafat movement. But we all know that the violent turn of events in Chauri Chaura has literally brought the entire non cooperation movement to a halt and it never revived. Taking lessons from these and understanding the problems of the local population, Gandhiji decided that he will pick up salt as a tool for disobedience because it attracted the attention of even the most common people. The reason why a lot of other agitations which took place for freedom struggle did not actually gain the traction in the masses, it's because the activities taken up by the populist leaders or popular leaders of those times were completely difficult for the common population to understand and appreciate. So Gandhiji decided that he needed a very strong inauguration that would inspire more and more number of people to disobey salt law, and the collective voice be heard to the British, and there is a possibility of the British coming back to negotiations with the Indians. So this was the motivation behind it. So what happened? Gandhi started this march with 78 of his volunteers, and he walked nearly 240 miles or 390 kilometers from Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi. This impacted a lot of other events as well. So, for example, in southern India, we have Rajaji, a close disciple of Mahatma Gandhi, who also went on to become the first Governor General of India, uh, post independent India, who is an Indian. that is after Lord Mountbatten. Rajaji was the first Governor General and also the last Governor General who is an Indian. So he led a satyagraha or salt disobedience movement in Vedaranya. Similarly, Gandhi was arrested in Dharasana. This Dharasana Satyagraha drew worldwide attention to the Indian national movement through extensive newspaper and newsreel coverage, especially in the Time magazine in America. So the Satyagraha against the salt tax continued for almost 1 year, which ended with Gandhi's release from jail and negotiations with Viceroy Lord Irwin at the second roundtable conference. So this entire sequence of events has inspired various other events as well. Say, for example, in this particular situation, unlike the non-cooperation movement, there was indeed violence, but this time Gandhiji did not stop the movement. He believed in his satyagraha and went ahead with the initially planned movement. So, in the northwest frontier province as well, there was support from Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan and various other volunteers across the country. So, this is the history and the significance of Dandi March, and the fact that he was able to understand the concerns of the larger public and appeal to them emotionally through the choice of salt as a measure of protest is a worthy example to understand and realize that whenever we want to bring a change, we have to recognize one particular thing that will have an impact across the country, across people from all walks of life. So, that is the gist of this article and the lessons that we can learn from this movement. That's it for today. Thank you.